OP tier champs from last patch, including Diana, Hui, and Lulu, are all nerfed for S1.4, so we'll have a new look for the tier list. A bunch of tank items are being nerfed as well, and there's a change to Infinity Edge that's going to benefit many ADCs. So we'll be breaking everything down and providing you guys with an update to the solo queue tier list for every single role. And do you remember when knowing how to set up a freeze in low elo made you special? These days, you're considered a troll if you don't know what a freeze is. Problem is, challengers are so out of touch with the fact that everyone in low elo has improved, so if you ask for help, you just keep getting the same outdated advice. Or even worse, they give you tips that only work in high elo, like how you should sync up your wave crashes with your teammates in multiple lanes to set up invades or objective priority. The theoretically correct play is usually not what actually works in your own elo. Oftentimes, it's something that may seem out of the ordinary, like split pushing as an ADC that will give you way more agency. We teach you the correct way to play League like everyone else does, but also the adaptations that actually work in your elo, so you'll always have multiple great ideas for what to do to win games. We're constantly producing and updating our strategies with players getting better, so SkillCapped is by far the best platform for learning League of Legends. We're so confident that if you don't climb 5 divisions while actively using SkillCapped, you can claim a full refund. Our service has zero risk with the potential to save you tons of time in your climb, so make sure to give us a try. So as always, we're going to start off the video by breaking down all of the system changes, and then we'll go into the role-specific champion changes right after that. Merc treads are getting a small buff for this patch, with the cost being lowered from 1,300 to 1,250 gold. Definitely not a change that is going to alter your decision-making around whether you should buy Merc treads or not, as they'll still only be situationally strong against heavy AP and crowd control. It's not like you'll just start spamming Merc treads now every single game due to this buff, so it's a pretty negligible one for the most part. Buff to Symbiotic Souls is a bit more interesting because right now it's just being heavily outclassed by Swiftness boots. Movement speed is going up from 35 to 40, so this probably adds about 0.5% win rate onto the boots, but even then Swiftness would still outperform. Pyke, for example, is one champ who does primarily build Symbiotic Souls, as players are purchasing the boots in 57% of games, but the win rate is only 48%. Swiftness boots, on the other hand, are played in 25% of Pyke games and have a 51% win rate, so a 3% gap between the boots is quite big, and we don't see a buff like this bumping Symbiotic Souls up 3% to reach parity with Swiftness boots. It's actually really shocking that Swiftness boots are avoiding nerfs for this patch, and they have been the most OP boots in the game for the entire season so far. Nunu and Amumu, who have been two of the stronger junglers in meta right now, have been abusing Abyssal Mask, so Riot's nerfing it slightly for this patch, with the magic resist going down from 50 to 45. Will this change really be enough to alter the strength of those junglers in meta though? Most likely not, because first of all, 5 magic resist is not even that big of a nerf, and secondly, you don't even buy Abyssal until your 3rd item a lot of the time, so you won't even be feeling the nerf for the majority of the game. The upgrade to Winter's approach being Thimble Winter is not going to be providing you with as strong of a shield for this patch, as the base shield is going down from 100 scaling to 180 to 100 at all levels. As if Tank Jace wasn't already bad enough after his nerfs from last patch, you're definitely going to want to avoid him now. Taric, Swain, Maokai, and Gragas are a few other champs who have been buying Winter's approach quite regularly in S1.3, so they'll be getting slightly weaker for this patch too. Heartsteel users are not going to be getting quite as tanky for S1.4, as the damage to max health conversion on the passive proc is going from 10 to 8% max health. Mundo, Skarner, Tahm Kench, Sejuani, Cho'Gath, Sion, and Shen have been the primary users of Heartsteel in recent patches, so they will be losing the most amount of strength due to this nerf. One of League's most hated items is getting a nerf, as plated steel caps will have its damage reduction lowered from 12 to 10%. Similar to the Merc treads change earlier on, this change really shouldn't do a whole lot in terms of altering your decision to buy the boots or not. If you're against a physical damage comp, steel caps are still going to be very strong, so as long as you're building them in the correct spot, the nerf shouldn't cause them to drop in priority. The damage that you get from the Unending Despair passive won't be as high for this patch, as the base value is being completely removed from the item. Nerf is a small blow to a lot of tanks, but we likely don't see a big drop in priority for Unending Despair due to the change. And then one of the bigger item changes of the entire patch is going to Infinity Edge, as the cost of the item is going down by 150 gold, but you are losing 5 AD to compensate. Gold efficiency wise, this is a small nerf because 5 AD has a gold value of 175. This means for the change to be neutral, cost would have had to have been reduced by 175, but it is being reduced by 150, so you're technically losing 25 gold worth of stats due to this change. We actually think this adjustment will be net positive though, because access to the completed item a bit faster should end up being more valuable over the course of many games than the 25 gold loss will be. Hitting that mid-game spike on ADC is just so big, and the fact you're getting there quicker in exchange for losing 2 minions worth of gold efficiency means this should be net positive. So with all the item changes out of the way, let's move on over to top lane, starting with Gangplank. Gangplank is going to have his scaling power increased, as AD growth is going from 3.7 to 4.2. So at level 18, this means you'll be getting an additional 8 AD moving forward. Not a crazy buff by any means, and we can't see it being quite enough to warrant a move up up the tier list for Gangplank, so he's going to remain in the top lane B tier. More of a quality of life change than anything for this next one, as Jace is going to have his W attack speed reach the attack speed cap. So as we can see in the comparison clips here, in S1.3, Jace W would be firing off at 2.68 attacks per second, while in S1.4, it's now going to be at 3 attacks per second. More of a placebo buff than anything here, as Jace will not be moving up the tier list. Sion has been one of the weaker tanks as of late, so he's going to have his base armor increased for this patch, going from 32 to 36. Base health regen of Sion is getting a boost as well, being increased from 7.5 to 9. Considering we're seeing a nerf to Heartsteel this patch, these buffs should just help to outweigh that nerf, and we see Sion gaining very minimal power due to these buffs. So we're going to be keeping Sion down in the top lane B tier for now. Top lane Warwick is being targeted with the nerf, as his Q mana cost will be increasing from 70 scaling to 90 to 80 scaling to 100. So a 10 mana increase at all ranks, which will put a dent in the laning power of Warwick, as spamming out Q for sustain off cooldown will be more punishing from now on. Warwick should still remain a very strong top lane pick, but we'll be dropping him out of the OP tier and placing him in S. So here's how the top lane tier list is shaping out for S1.4. Currently, the strongest top lane champs are ones who can abuse swiftness boots the best, as we are bumping Kayle into the OP tier to join Urgot. Garen and Darius are two others who are just shy of an OP tier spot, who are really good with swiftness boots, and they're also great with Axiom Arcanists, so take advantage of them before any nerfs come through. Top lane Vayne got a lot better last patch due to the true damage changes, as she's been dominating running Press the Attack as her keystone rune. In S1.3, Riot changed true damage so that it's now amplified by damage amping effects like the passive on PTA, so in an extended fight where Vayne can get multiple true damage procs off, you get way more value from running Press the Attack now. Vayne top is a super good answer to meta picks like Garen, Darius, Cassante, and Mordekaiser, so it's a really good pocket pick to pull out right now. We'll have to see throughout the patch exactly how much power the tank item nerfs actually shave off. For now, we are moving Cho'Gath down from OP into S tier because he will lose a fair bit of strength due to the Heartsteel nerf, but we'll hold off on moving anyone else down for now. Riot's going to be adding a little bit of viability back to Teemo jungle, as his E monster damage is going up from 125 to 145%. As we can see in the comparison clips, this equates to a very minor boost in damage, so we don't really see Teemo making a big comeback in the jungle due to this buff. For now, we will be leaving Teemo in the jungle B tier. Diana is actually getting a more significant change to her monster damage, as passive damage to monsters is dropping from 300 to 225%. As we can see here, after 6 auto attacks and 2 passive procs in S1.3, Diana would have the red buff at 1,742 health, but in S1.4, that number is higher at 1,776. So this means every passive proc you are losing about 17 damage. To help compensate though, Q damage is going up by 10 at all ranks, while W damage is also up by 2 at all ranks. So your clear speed is getting nerfed even with these compensation buffs. However, we don't see the passive nerf completely derailing Diana's power level. For now, we will be moving Diana into the S tier, but there's a chance that she falls to A if the passive nerf does land a bit more impactful than what we expect. So we've got a couple of changes to Elise for this patch that should increase her strength as a jungler. The one nerf is to her human form W damage, as the base is dropping by 20 at max rank, while the AP ratio is going from 95 to 75%. Everything else are buffs though, as Spiderling damage is going up from 8 scaling to 26 to 10 scaling to 40. You can see here that this damage does add up over the course of an extended fight, as with 2 Spiderlings out and them autoing 5 times, you're getting 279 damage as opposed to 231 from last patch. Spider form W attack speed is going up from 60 scaling to 100% to 60 scaling to 120%. Spider form W cooldown is dropping significantly, going from 10 to 6 seconds. So because the W nerf is more of a mid to late game change, Elise should be net buffed with these adjustments. W changes and Spiderling damage buff will boost up Elise's clear speed, and her skirmish power will be slightly better as well. So we will be giving Elise a push up the jungle tier list for S1.4, moving her from B into A tier. So with Diana dropping out of the jungle OP tier, we now have Nunu and Master Yi locking down the spots. As we noted earlier on in the video, we don't think the Abyssal Mask nerf will really put much of a dent in the strength of Nunu, so we're leaving him in the OP tier. We moved Yi up into the OP tier during our S1.3 mid-patch tier list, as the attack speed cap buff, along with many junglers around him getting weaker, has helped to elevate his relative power in meta. All in all though, with Diana now nerfed, there won't really be much of a heavy outlier in the jungle anymore. For the most part, it is still Conqueror junglers who are on top, as the buffs to domination keystones did not significantly help boost the power of champs like Nidalee, Gragas, and Rengar, who are all lower down on the tier list. Echo is getting buffed this patch, and the changes should help out mid lane a bit more than jungle. Its Q1 base damage is going up from 70 scaling to 130 to 80 scaling to 140. The reason we think this helps mid lane Echo out more than jungle is because Echo uses his Q quite a bit in lane to help him farm, especially in more difficult matchups. So added damage on Q will not only help him in trades blades, but allow him to more reliably secure last hits. If the change also makes it so that Echo can begin one-shotting the ranged minions a bit earlier on in the game, then this could be even bigger as well. Echo mid already saw a pretty nice spike in power last patch due to the Hail of Blades buff, so we'll be giving him a push into the S tier due to this direct buff. Yasuo will be the only other mid laner buff for this patch, as he will no longer deal reduced damage from crits. We'll have to see if this has any influence over the meta builds on Yasuo, because right now you don't actually rush a crit item on him, as Blade of the Ruined King is most optimal, but could this buff be enough to change that? Regardless, Yasuo gets stronger for this patch, not only due to this direct buff, but Infinity Edge being less expensive is great for him too, as reaching that 3-item spike on Yasuo is just such a massive break point for him due to hitting 100% crit. Even with the buffs though, we don't quite think that S tier is on the table for Yasuo, so we'll be leaving him in A. Hui is going to be issued multiple nerfs, as he's been one of the stronger mids as of late. QW base damage is being lowered from 80 scaling to 160 to 60 scaling to 160. WE damage will see its base lowered by 5 at all ranks, and then the AP ratio is being knocked down a bit, going from 20 to 15%. The third nerf is to Hui's passive, as the AP ratio will be lowered from 35 to 30%. On their own, each change is a pretty minor nerf, but all three combined will add up to remove Hui from the mid lane OP tier. We're going to be adjusting Hui's tier list placement, moving him from OP down to A. Mel is going to have a bunch of power shifted around in her kit, as Q missile speed is dropping from 5,000 to 4,500, while Q range takes a small dip, going from 1,000 to 950. W duration is being lowered from 1 to 0.75 seconds. The damage is dropping from 40 scaling to 70% to 40 scaling to 60%, while mana cost is up from 60 to 80. E root duration will be lowered significantly, going from 1.75 to 1.25 seconds at rank 1. E damage is going up though, as the base will be increased from 60 scaling to 220 to 60 scaling to 240, while AP ratio is up from 50 to 60%. And then lastly, R per stack AP ratio will be increased from 2.5 to 3.5%. So Mel is most definitely weaker now throughout the early to mid game, as the only buffs she received here are to her scaling strength. Overall, we see these changes landing as net negative, and therefore Mel will not be moving up the tier list for S1.4, as we're going to be keeping her down in the mid lane B tier. So mid lane is the one role that really does not have a few clear outliers that are just dominating the meta. The role is actually pretty balanced at the moment, as even the champs we have in the OP tier, being Syndra and Ahri, are not even that much better than many of the S tier picks. Both Diana and Annie are being bumped up the mid lane tier list for this patch, as Diana will be benefiting from her direct buffs, while Annie has really been liking the electrocute buff from last patch, as she shot up in win rate quite a bit due to that change. Karma mid is one champ we're pretty high on right now, and she's definitely the most underrated mid laner in the game. Axiom Arcanist is just really strong on her, and she's been thriving running a heavy ability haste focus build of Malignance with Horizon Focus, so that she can just spam her R out as often as possible. Ever since Ashe got adjusted a few patches ago, she's been one of the weakest ADCs, so Riot has a couple of buffs lined up for her. Q total AD ratio is getting a boost, going from 110 scaling to 130% to 111 scaling to 135%. W AD ratio is up from 100 to 110%. R damage is being increased as well, going up by 50 at all ranks. So nothing overly impactful for Ashe here, as we do still expect for her to be on the weaker side of things for S1.4. We will give Ashe a slight nudge up the tier list, going from C into B tier, as that's the extent of what we see these buffs providing for her. A Kalista nerf is being issued that will definitely impact competitive play more than solo queue, as her W max health damage is going from 14 scaling to 18% to 10 scaling to 18%. Solo queue Kalista has already been in a very weak state even prior to these nerfs, so she'll continue to remain placed in the ADC C tier. We've got a nerf to Kog'Maw on the way, as his Q damage will be dropping from 90 scaling to 290 to 80 scaling to 260. Considering Kog literally had over a 53% win rate in S1.3, this nerf will not be enough to reduce his power level by much at all, so continue playing him if you've been enjoying the pick. Twitch will be losing a decent chunk of damage from his R for this patch, as Axiom Arcanist will no longer provide the 14% damage amp and will instead be giving him 9%. If we have a look at the comparison clips, we can see that with 3 auto attacks in S1.3, Twitch would be dealing 439 damage, but now in S1.4, that drops to 423. So this equates to about 5.3 less damage per auto attack when you have your R active with Twitch. Of course, when you get more items, this will become even higher, but this is just with one item being Yuntal Wild Arrows. So we definitely see Twitch losing a decent amount of power for S1.4, and we will have to keep track of whether or not Axiom remains an optimal rune choice on him moving forward. For now, we'll be moving Twitch from OP into S tier, however, there's a chance he falls as far as A tier. So the ADC meta for S1.4 should be solely dominated by Jinx. Jinx was already highly contested in S1.3, but now with Twitch nerfed and Infinity Edge buffed, it solidifies her spot in the OP tier even more. The thing about Jinx is that she can be paired up with almost any support in the game and find a way to make things work. With an Enchanter, the mid to late game teamfight is incredible, but if she's with a melee engaged support, the ability for her to follow up with her W and E is great, which gives her a amazing adaptability. Vayne has been really great as well due to getting a bunch of indirect buffs over the past while, and is the ADC who slots in alongside Jinx in the OP tier. Kate has been right on the edge of breaking back into S tier, so with the Infinity Edge adjustments for this patch, we're going to be moving her up. Despite continuing to hold a pretty high play rate for solo Q, Nautilus has been a lower win rate support for a while now, so he's getting buffed. Q base damage is what Riot's targeting, as it will be increased by 15 at all ranks. So nothing too over the top, but what should be enough to give Nautilus that push up the tier list, as we are moving him from B into A tier. With Thresh buff for last patch, we definitely still think that Thresh will reign supreme as that priority hook support. I'm sure most players will be glad to see these next set of changes, as Lulu will be hit with 3 different nerfs. W attack speed is being lowered by 5% at all ranks, and W cooldown is going up as well by 1 second at all ranks. E damage and shield will be taking a hit, going from 80 scaling to 260 to 80 scaling to 240. So as much as we'd like for these changes to completely remove Lulu from meta, they really shouldn't be enough to drastically reduce her power level. Lulu is just so OP in S1.3 that all these nerfs should do is bring her back to parity with many of the other strong solo Q supports. So it's just a minor adjustment on the tier list for Lulu, as we are dropping her from OP into S tier. So for the support tier list, we now just have 2 champs locking down OP tier spots, as Thresh and Nami will be the highest priority picks of the patch. Now that Lulu has been nerfed, the support role as a whole is actually in a pretty balanced state. Over the past couple of patches, we've seen nerfs to Poppy, Rel, Lulu, and Tahm Kench, which has helped the role become much less top heavy. There are just so many solid S and A tier picks to choose from right now. The changes to Elise are more difficult to predict exactly how they'll influence her power as a support. In theory, the nerf to W shouldn't be all that bad, considering you don't max the spell out first, and the AP ratio nerf doesn't hurt as bad for support since you have a lesser gold income anyways. We still see Elise being in and around an A or S tier level, so we'll be leaving her in S for now, but if the nerfs do hit a bit harder, we could drop her down to A for the mid-patch tier list. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So there you have it everyone, a complete look at the solo Q tier list for every single role as we head into S1.4. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you back soon.